All righty, welcome. I am Heather Pierce Campbell, the legal website warrior. I'm an attorney and legal coach based here in Seattle, Washington, serving online information entrepreneurs throughout the US and the world. Welcome to another episode of Guts, Grit, and Great Business. I am super excited to introduce you today to Jim Carter. Welcome, Jim.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Well, it's so good to connect with you. So Jim and I, the very short backstory is that Jim and I met at a Lewis House event last month, and we were chit-chatting. And of course, the topic of AI came up. And wouldn't you know it, Jim is really focused right now on AI. So I thought, we need to have this conversation on the podcast because this is not yet a conversation that I've had here. So, welcome to Jim Carter. For those of you that don't know Jim, Jim is a passionate technology coach with over 25 years of experience, specializing in advising social impact organizations, brands, and experts on maximizing growth using content and technology. Through his business Fast Foundations, he co-leads a mastermind program that hosts both in-person and virtual events to teach entrepreneurs essential business skills and create a lasting impact. And with a focus on AI, tech expertise, and mentorship, Jim empowers entrepreneurs to harness the power of artificial intelligence in their daily lives and businesses. Welcome, Jim. So good to have you.
It's gonna be fun. And I'm excited that this is the first topic. This is the first time AI has been a topic on your show. This is gonna be great.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I will say I'm very I have some personal curiosity about how this is going to go. And you'll see as the conversation evolves. I've got from a legal perspective, my own thoughts around AI, how it can be ethically used in our businesses, etc. But it'll be really interesting to hear more of your insights, your experience using it. I know you're familiar with a wide variety of tools because we've been connected on Instagram since that
Yeah.
event. I've been following some of your
I
posts.
kick them out all the time because they're coming
Right,
out so much.
right,
Yeah,
a
no, and
daily.
that's so wonderful because here's the thing is it's such a rapidly evolving space that there are no experts in it. Like some people call me an AI expert. I humbly thank them, but also slightly disagree because those that are leading the charge, it's still evolving, right?
So new.
It's not linear growth, it's not exponential. There's cubic growth in this thing. It's massive. So what I love is I learn just as much as I teach and as much as I mentor. So I'm excited to possibly even learn from you just through the conversation because we have this time to really dive into it. And you're going to have such a great, very industry and niche perspective on it that
Mm.
there's no way that I would. And I think that's just kind of like my charge for everybody listening or watching is take these concepts and put it into your own world, put it into your expertise to figure out, oh, I agree with that, or I don't agree with that. And this is why. That's going to make you a better entrepreneur to think about the way that you can really approach this and implement it into your world.
Mm. Oh, absolutely. And I mean, on this point, because you're right, AI is new, it's evolving, it's rapidly evolving. I'm in a book club that is specifically devoted, like this year, the whole year, the club is studying the intersection of human consciousness, spirituality, and AI.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Sign me
that's
up.
it. That's the one topic. And so we have these brilliant people getting together weekly to actually talk about this topic. And it's just been really fascinating to learn from folks. And they bring in featured experts into the group who are literally writing the books on AI out there. And they're the same folks that are making recommendations to governments and to corporations around the world about both the benefits and dangers of AI and how to curb, some of the things that people are seeing that may be threatening or really super problematic about certain uses of AI. So it is a really I will start by saying that we're going to have a teeny tiny conversation about AI today that is, just keep in mind the the width and breadth of what the total conversation is. Like it is such a big conversation. It's a really big conversation, right?
It absolutely is. But it's such an important one to have, which is why I'm glad we're having it. And
Yeah,
we're going to look back on this conversation in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. And we're also going to see how fast it's evolved. And
totally.
you could also just say this is one of those rare occurrences where a piece of tech is evolving so rapidly that if you don't adopt it quick enough, you will get outpaced. So the question is, what piece of it are you interested in? Because you have to pay attention to it. So I'm so glad to hear you're doing that. I didn't even know something like that existed. Again, all right, look at that. Wait, 5 minutes in, I've already learned something.
Mhm. Oh man, and there are some experts on various aspects of AI and technology, right? Even the definition of technology, I mean, of AI, people can't necessarily agree on. Like it's just really fascinating the direction that the conversations go. But what I'd like to talk about today is the use of AI specifically for entrepreneurs within the world of entrepreneurship, right? In the businesses of the folks who I support, the folks who might be listening to this podcast, who are thinking like, I can't ignore this. I do need to pay attention to it. And even if they aren't one of the early adopters or they haven't gotten in and poked around with a lot of it, that they're wondering like, how might this fit for me? And some of the folks listening probably are early adopters, right? There are ways that lots of entrepreneurs have jumped on the bandwagon. And I think part of perhaps maybe even in this conversation, maybe if you're listening, it will be in a separate conversation because I really want Jim to share his insights with us today. But I am particularly interested in the ethical uses of AI and how we do things in a way that not only supports our businesses, but does not harm the marketplace and does not harm other individuals and businesses. So that's just so you know, that's my perspective and vision, but I'm going to be super interested to hear because I mean, you're a technology coach. Clearly, you come from the technology space with your own background, and I'm sure lots of things have informed your experience. And so I would love to know, starting off, where did this path start for you? Like, take us back in your history a little bit and share with us about your roots. Where did the pathway, whether into business or technology, where did that start for you?
Yeah, thanks for asking. It's interesting because I've had a lot of opportunity to kind of go back and think about the different points of my history and what led to where my path evolved and moved around. It started for me when I was a teenager. I I'm an Eagle Scout in the Boy Scouts of America. So if you're watching the video, I have a bird on my arm, and that
Ooh, you're
reminds
like
me.
a serious Eagle Scout.
Absolutely, it was the best way that I could remember to honor that commitment of my life.
Mm.
And at the time, when I was growing up in the scouting program, my dad was really set on trying to find advantages for the family. It was always his strive. I grew up in very middle class, working class home. We had enough money, but we didn't have extra money. It was always we were paycheck to paycheck moving forward. I love my parents. They gave it everything they had to just give me a wonderful life. And one of the things that they were committed to doing was trying to find ways to implement technology to give our family a little bit of an advantage where others didn't want to. And I think that was the first time I kind of had that this is why you should lean in kind of a mindset.
Mm.
And I'll never forget. I remember being there. I remember being at, I think it was Sears. I remember where it was. I'm trying to remember if that was the actual place, but I think it was like a Sears. And we bought an Apple IIe computer. I'm dating myself, but this would have been early 90s. And we were so excited, brought it home, took up the whole desk, right? And, I had to buy floppy disks, all this stuff. And I had this like wonder, came over me as a kid, just like, wow, this is just the stuff I've seen on movies, and I have one here. It was the act of like, for those of you that are my age, if you will. I'm 43. Am I 43 now? I just had a birthday. 40. 43. 43. And at the time, this thought of the personal computer when you're a kid, it just doesn't make sense. But when you actually receive it, when you're holding it, and nobody in your life had ever had anything like that before, and now you do, there's this sense of like, wow, I've got this opportunity ahead of me that I can just do something with. And I felt like I had a responsibility, even as a kid, to try something. So it was great. We enjoyed it. My scoutmaster happened to be a computer repair technician, so he had all these extra parts. And when he saw that I had this desire to like learn more with it, he had a conversation with my dad, and he's like, "Oh, I'll just drop off a bunch of old parts at the house." And everybody called me Jimmy as a kid, so Jimmy could put them all together and try to figure it all out. Now you probably can't look at me without thinking Jimmy, right? But here we are.
Jimmy.
So I took that challenge and I continued to grow with it. And at the same time, my dad started to try to learn programming to build stuff for my troop. And he got frustrated and he gave me the book that he bought. Remember the Dummies series
Oh,
books?
totally.
He bought DOS for Dummies, which was one of the early programming languages, gave it to me. I read it. I learned how to program in DOS. And he was like, oh, maybe Jimmy's got something here. Like he saw my ambition to it. And rewind to like the level of like worldly responsibilities you had when you're a teenager. Now thinking about it, like picking up a new hobby, all of that. But at the time, it was just like I had this time and I had this passion. So my parents really embraced it. And it really just grew from there. I had the best computer on the block because I had all these Frankenstein parts that I put together, and I had the supercomputer in my house. I had learned how to program. Somehow convinced my parents to buy high-speed internet, even though there's no way they could have afforded it. I actually feel bad about it now, thinking about how much they spent. But I had the best computer on the block. I had this desire to code, and I had the fastest internet, and I was regarded by my friends. They were like, "Can we come over to your house and use your computer?" So I felt this sense of like, okay, well, what do I do with this? How do I evolve this? How do I turn it into something that can really drive me? And it's that little bit of context to my story that's driven me. So I grew up with a service mindset in scouting. So I've always thought about ways that I can give back to my country, to my community, to fellow man and woman. And for me, finding ways to use technology creatively has always just driven me. And that's
Mm.
really I very proudly wear my heart on my sleeve because I really try to show up and I care with what I do. And I love working with certified B Corps. I'm a certified B Corp founder myself with a past startup, nonprofit organizations, for purpose organizations. I'm indifferent. I love just helping people with mission and hearts that are centered, and that's really driven me. The through line with everything that I've done, I've strayed, but I've always come back, and that's kept me going to be able to connect with people like you, like others in the circle, like Lewis. I'm proud to call him a good friend. He's also been a client. I've supported him. We met because we met at Pencils of Promise, the nonprofit organization out of New York, on a charity trip in Guatemala. Right? You keep your ethos healthy, you get in the right circles, and you let that guide you. And that's a quick snapshot into my story of what brings me here today. And now with AI becoming commonplace and everybody being so interested in it, and full circle, it's the next biggest delivery of technology to us since the personal computer. I feel that same calling and that personal responsibility again to do something about it.
Mm. Well, the interesting thing I think about technologies, it does have like it's a little bit of a double-edged sword in that certain people have lots of access to technology, right? Whereas others can sometimes be excluded. But when technology is distributed, used, able to be accessed by certain folks, it can really level the playing field in some ways or redistribute resources. Like I'm even thinking about because from my standpoint, right, coming from the legal industry, it's like it's very interesting to me what some companies are doing in the legal tech space that are narrowing the gaps that exist in the legal industry, that are basically access to justice gaps where certain portions of the population just don't get legal services or don't get access to the information that they need to make important legal decisions, right? And this is where technology can really be used in ways to redistribute resources, access, right? Lift people up. And I think these are the ways I love your story because these are the ways that we should be focused on anyways, right? As a society, like how do we help people get greater access to technology, to resources that are going to improve their life, improve their ability to become educated or self-educated, right? Improve access to certain doors being opened that might otherwise not have been opened for them. So I think it's a really great conversation. I think it's super powerful. My personal mission in the world is to support impact based, mission driven entrepreneurs who really have a heart for doing the right work in the world, right? To support them so that they build better businesses, build stronger businesses, like really achieve the impact that they want to achieve in the world. And I think that there's some significant opportunities with AI when it comes to that.
I agree with you. And we have a very similar personal mission. I've simplified mine down to just I help people who help people. Because for me it's about the K factor and
Mm,
doing it starting with the right people that I want in my circle. I've done a great job of cutting out so much negativity in my
mm,
life, and that's made space to make really great connections. But to your point about access and knowledge, in fact, so for those that are listening, watching, we're recording this in early May. Today was actually Google's developer conference called I/O, and I was eating lunch. I had the live stream on. I was watching some of it. I didn't get through it all, but something you said was really important. Today, today, Google announced their generative AI product as now generally available, which is massive. Last week, Microsoft announced it for Bing. And then, of
mm,
course, last November, we got ChatGPT from OpenAI. But in watching the keynote about all of this, I can't remember all the pillars that they said right now because I just watched it. But the very first one that they focused on was knowledge. The ethos and the reason that they're doing this, and it all goes back to what Google's mission. I'm going to botch this is to to collect, process, and make available like the world's information. Yeah, that
mhm.
is wrong, but the spirit of that is
Some
correct.
version
I
of that.
can't repeat it
Yes.
right,
Yep.
but their goal is to make sense of the world's information, but it all comes back to the knowledge. So they're doing that with the next version of what Bard, their current generative AI product, is going to be. And the fascinating thing about this is that AI is demystifying the work involved in making sense of information and receiving it in the way that you want it. And it's fascinating to see how people are using it, no matter what
Mm,
field. Whether you have a simple question and you want a simple answer, or you have a big unknown and you need coaching to get there, you can do all that through AI. But it's not just about text. It's about working with imagery. It's about mixed media.
mm,
It's also virtual reality. It's augmented reality. It's mixed reality. There's so many ways that you can make sense of how it can impact your world, your customers, your personal life, the things that you do. The question is just, where do you want to try to focus first? Where do you see the biggest opportunity? Or you just have to be open to thinking big. And
mhm,
one of the coolest results, the implicit result of me learning more about AI is that it's got me thinking bigger constantly. It's actually got my team thinking bigger. I just had a call with my lead copywriter today who, we have a service and we offer that service with the bespoke agency that I run. It's in long form copywriting, right? I
mm,
ton of experience in SEO over the years. And not only did we cut our service cost in half and double the output and have more margin with the recent AI hybrid thing that we implemented, which I will get into here, but he came back to me today again and was like, dude, we can go further. He's like, I've just been experimenting. He's like, I think we can do it like this. And we can almost, it doesn't have to be done for you anymore. It could be done with you. But now the client is in more of the driver's seat, but it takes the pressure off of it, and without getting too far, into the weeds on that, like the theme of that is the most important piece, which is when you see what's now possible, which you didn't think anybody was capable of just a month ago. What does that do for you as an entrepreneur? Maybe you held back on thinking you were a visionary because you didn't want to think technical. Well, none of that matters anymore. You no longer have to start writing from a blank canvas or drawing from anything in between. So when you realize you have all these tools available, to your point, the access is just it's available. It's there.
Mm,
And right now all of this is free. Right? Like that's the crazy thing. It's not like these are massive enterprise licenses that are only reserved for, Fortune 100 plus companies. ChatGPT, Bard, Bing, all these services, it's a gold rush. And everybody is trying to get on top of this. So they just want users. They want you to try it. And the coolest thing about AI is the more you use it, the better it gets. So you're actually contributing towards the greater good in theory by trying it. It's a
mm.
really interesting way of processing this technology.
Yeah. No, it is, and that is an interesting concept to think about the participation itself shaping the tool, right? I think there I've like my legal brain goes to a couple of questions and concerns in that process because who I'm thinking about, right, are my business client content creators that have proprietary information, frameworks, systems that they use, that they teach, that they might maybe even utilize in the back end of their business. And that kind of stuff, I mean, you go read the terms of any of these tools, and they're probably right now going to tell you, like, don't enter anything in here that you don't want, right, exposed or not
Of
used in
course.
certain ways or whatever. And so you do have to be cognizant of what you're inputting into these tools. Um, but the first thing that comes to mind, like from a risk analysis perspective for me, which is usually where I start because my brain wants to go risk analysis so that we can do it the right way, right? We can use the tools the right way, like whatever that means. Use it so that we minimize risk, damage, costs, whatever. So, with that in mind, I'm curious what your perspective is on the risks. I mean, I certainly have thoughts around like what I'm seeing in the marketplace and where I go, oh, that could be a problem. So, for example, just on the topic of thought leadership, I don't think AI replaces genuine thought leadership, right? And particularly for people who are using AI a little bit like a search function, a little bit like Google, a little bit like Bing, or some of the past, like even just internet basic functions, right? What is your thought around, first of all, risk as far as how we use AI, particularly for those who, we'll just say it, have not yet necessarily developed their full body of expertise, their body of work, right? Can you talk to us a little bit about your thoughts on that?
Yeah, of course. On the risk side,
Mhm.
caveat emptor, right? This in essence is no difference than you signing up for xyzservice.com and you agreeing to the terms of 123service.co. It is the same. The you still have to be aware of what you're agreeing to. We all do and don't check and uncheck the terms and conditions box that we do and don't read. Let's just make it as honest as possible, right? But you still have to be responsible for your actions.
Mhm.
So, to your point, correct. Please do not put your personal information that you do not want anybody else to know into a third party tool because it will go into a database.
And even beyond personal, any business information that you do not want that tool to know, right? Like I was
Correct.
on a legal CLE on the topic of AI and privacy, and there are companies that are essentially building some of their own tools on the backs of existing AI and inputting like a whole bunch of database information into that tool and immediately violating the privacy rights of everybody or whatever is contained in the database, right?
Yes.
So being very, very cognizant of the overlays. My goal is that people just pause and think about what they're inputting before they go take some action that could really potentially harm themselves, their business, their
Of course.
clients. Yeah.
Of course. So you still have to be a responsible adult and business owner. Absolutely. But it also shouldn't stop you from utilizing the creativity of it to possibly get you out of your way. And what I mean by that is you don't have to say, like, let's just say, for example, we were going to use, let's come up with a fictitious example that we were going to use ChatGPT as a CRM. It's a cool concept that I actually brought up to the group that I'm coaching. when they were like, how can you really push the limits of it? I was like, well, ChatGPT is great for brain dumping, just getting information out of your head and then making sense of it. You could, if you're willing to share your information, your client information, again, nothing about them and their personal stuff, but let's just say the name, the contract terms, did they pay their invoice? Like, let's just keep it simple where it's like, if that was a spreadsheet, it'd be okay. So you can make that decision whether or not you even want to release that information. Let's say you do. You can just get that information out of your head in a chat GPT prompt, and then you can have it come back and repeat that and say, now give it to me in a table. Now tell me who's at risk of churning. Now tell me who I should check in on. Oh, I've told you a little bit about this client, Heather. This is who she is. This is how I like to converse with her. Help me draft an email to check in with her. None of that is PII to a point, but it opens up this thought experiment of how can we do more with the information we have and possibly be even more creative than something we did before. But you don't have to even go that far with it. You could say, I have these fictitious clients and don't give them the names, but still say the same information. So it's almost like, let's say they did have a data breach. Technically, they couldn't tie anything to information that you had. You
Right,
you
if you're
you could,
creating like an avatar or a customer
yeah, you could
profile,
masquerade
not
it.
an actual totally, totally.
That's my way of masking it, if you will. You wouldn't do that with a third party service. You would agree if they have the right terms, they're going to protect your data, all of these things. But in this case, it's so different. We can take that extra step to be a little bit more careful. I just had this conversation with a client that I ran a workshop with last week. I won't mention their name on this call, but they produce a lot of original content. They've been in the business for years. They're a great nonprofit, and the question there was about privacy as well, about they've refined their editorial matrix and everything about the way that they produce. And they're like, well, we don't want to just give that to them, right? It's like, no, don't copy and paste that in there if you have a risk of them wanting to use it. But I will say, because the space is evolving so fast, OpenAI is doing a great job, in my personal opinion, of listening to the feedback and iterating. So they now have, again, as of early May, this could all change by the time you actually, whoever's listening to this, by the time you're listening to this, it could be totally different. I have no idea. But today, they now have a toggle switch, which allows you to basically opt to not save the information that's been going through. It redacts it from their servers. It absolutely pulls it out after 30 days. They're also releasing a corporate edition, I believe is what they're calling it, that has more granular controls about things like this. So you can have
Mm.
permission-based information. At the end of the day, if you tell ChatGPT something, it does not go into their general database. That is an opt-in feature, not an opt-out, but an opt-in. And again, I'm not responsible for their legal team. I'm only reporting the news, but
Still go read the
still, you
terms,
have to read the
people.
terms for important things you use, or at least understand the risk, to your point. So when it comes to risk mitigation, it's no different. And
Mhm.
kind of circling back to that question you had about then, well, what does that do for me at large? Like, when I'm aware of it, how does that impact change? I think this is now, we have to rethink risk mitigation for something that is fundamentally unproven. We're no longer in a society that an engineer can build something to fix one thing. Now we have tools that are so open-ended and so flexible and so robust that we actually get to rethink our risk tolerance. Like, think about it this way. Let's say I am not condoning that you use ChatGPT as a therapist. So if any therapists listening, please don't shame me. But ChatGPT understands EBT and lots of these different modalities and these methods. And you actually can have ChatGPT be a therapist if that's something that you want. Now, again, it's up to you if you want to put that information in their system. However, if you have been struggling with mental health, and this is not advice, I'm going to put that quick disclaimer out there, but this is a way of thinking about the difference that we're facing now versus before. If you're struggling with mental health and you've been terrified to actually pick up the phone and call to find a therapist, you could start that process from the comfort of your phone and just get some advice without judgment. You don't have to worry about another human even seeing it. It's all, you can say, act as an EBT therapist who has experience working with a 40-year-old male who is an entrepreneur, who is a father. Like, you can put your whole profile in there. You never have to say one thing about your name, your kids' names, none of that. And just ask for help and have it ask you as many questions as it needs to make sense of it. I really want everybody to think about the power in the modality. And to your point about risk tolerance,
Mm.
honestly, it's making me rethink what I'm more open to risking, because it gives me this unfair advantage that I didn't have. And that's a question everybody has to decide for themselves. But when you have this available, the question again, it all comes back to, what are you going to do with it? Because you can't ignore it any longer. It is at our doorstep. And we just have to make sense about, what is that going to do for business, for our personal lives, for the way we interact with others from here out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think people, I mean, what I would like for people is more people everywhere to be involved in the conversation. What I see generally is that kind of folks outside of my entrepreneurial circles, not really paying attention to this. If they don't, if they're not running a business themselves or otherwise like really into tech, you know what I mean, where they have like a personal interest in this stuff, um, I think there's a lot of folks not paying attention currently. And it is a really big conversation, in part because like part of the conversation having being had at the very, very upper levels of AI development and technology, and even the AI race, if we can call it that, between countries is like information is power. Who is going to quote unquote own, right, some of these mega databases of information, even that are being built on the backs of AI? So it is a really big, complex conversation, but the reality is I believe that there are ways as entrepreneurs, business owners, people helping people, that we can use this to increase efficiencies in our business, to potentially, maximize our messaging so that our messaging is getting out there in the right ways and to the right people and with the right words. And there are some things, that I think, and probably some really massively creative ways that people could be using AI. And I'll be curious to hear your thoughts because I'm sure you've seen some interesting things, even that I haven't, because I don't spend a ton of time poking around in it, right? I have my book club. I have like my own minimal uses of AI currently as I watch the trends. But I'd love, maybe we start there. What are some of the super creative uses that you are seeing of AI? And then we can kind of digest like what we think about those or your twist on them or
Of course.
recommendations, right?
Yeah, I'd love that. Let me start with one that's actually right up your alley, which is
Uh,
making sense of contracts. I'd love to give you a real use case that I jammed out with my wife because of what she's doing. So again, I'll leave a lot of the details out just to keep it really simple. But she is an auditor, and we'll leave it at that. She mainly audits finances, but in this case, the contract was really important to the outcome of the audit.
mm,
So this was a rare case. She normally doesn't need to read the contract that of, around the financial terms of what she's auditing. But it was one of those things where it was like, okay, if this person's liable, then now they owe a ton of money. But if they're not liable, then they're receiving money. It was just one of those kind of really weird
mhm.
use cases. But this contract, she was just like, why did they write this contract? This contract is a mess. And she was really struck. She has a finance major with a minor in contract law, and she was still struggling reading this contract. And she was just like, I can't make sense of this. She's like, can you just help me read this? And just, does this make sense to you? And I was like, no, it doesn't make sense to me. But I was like, you know what we can do, if you're willing, we can feed that paragraph into AI and we can have it help us explain it. And she was like, okay, yeah, I'm open to that. And I was like, first of all, no PII, right? Does it say anything about it? No, everything was open ended. It was client, customer, that kind of stuff.
Yep.
It was this simple. Open a new chat GPT session. I had her type in, learn everything about this next contract paragraph that I'm going to paste in, and acknowledge when you've learned it. Those are the words I typed. I had her type a colon, copy and pasted that clause in there, and then it said, okay, got it. What would you like me to do? And I had her ask the question, and the question was what she was trying to answer. And I'll leave that question out, but it had to do with, based off of this information, who is liable for work product? Let's put it that way.
Yep.
And then I also had her say, in the event that you do not have full confidence in the answer, ask me as many questions as you need in order for you to have the confidence to give me an answer. Like, this is just like if I hired you real quick to help me make sense of it, right? And it asked one question and she answered it. And then it said, based off of the information you gave me to learn and your answer to that question, the customer is liable. And then I had her challenge it. I said, critique your answer and cite the reasons why that customer is liable. And it reverse engineered the words in the contract and it made sense of it. And she was just like, holy hell, right? You know, and she was able to report that to her boss. Her boss, you know, acknowledged it. They reported it. Everybody was happy. Now, I want to hear your thoughts on this because, first of all, I don't know how many assets like yourself are willing to do like a one-time small little job like that, because is that even worth it and things like that. So in one way that brings accessibility to the forefront. She also wasn't asking it to make sense of the whole contract, rewrite it, find things that were no longer timely. Like, there's a big difference in what she needed it to do in terms of being a utility versus hiring an expert who can fully support it. But that's, I'd love to pause for a minute and actually get your thoughts on that, because that was a real use case. And what does that mean for, you know, like an expert like yourself who would be able to support with something like that, knowing that this person who still is above average, like my wife is, yes, she gets it, right? And she couldn't understand it, and
Oh,
I
yeah.
couldn't understand it, and we needed help.
Oh, totally. And let's be clear, some contracts are not well drafted, and even some that are often contain language that somebody's going to be like, what is this? What does this
Right.
mean? Break it down, right? And I think there's massive opportunity even within the context of legal to, and there are some tools, by the way, that are currently developed or being developed. This CLE that I was recently on a week or two ago, they had a presenter on this very thing, that it's like there are contract management tools based on AI that in particular will be used in-house by attorneys, because the trick with legal is information on the internet isn't necessarily all that it needs, right? And most of the AI tools that people are accessing, like Chat GPT, are large language based models, right? So they are literally trained on data sets that generally come from internet based data, right?
Correct.
And the other risk with that is that some of those data sets and the data contained, there were not permissions given for that data to be utilized or scraped. So, right. So there's a like a risk component always for me currently from a legal perspective on the outputs. And the biggest risk actually that I see with AI right now is non-experts on topics going to it for an expert-based opinion on a topic that the user cannot really fully analyze themselves.
Right.
And not because AI won't get there. It may. AI may totally get there. And especially like in regards to contract interpretation or things like that, there may be consumer-oriented tools based around AI that are developed for the very purposes of interpreting legal language. Are we there yet? I don't think so, because that model would need to be trained on case law. Like there's very specific interpretation of legal language based not only on the black letter of the law, but it's not always as simple as just being able to interpret the English language, right? So that's the risk. Like my brain is going like, oh, it is a really creative use, and I might still have some concerns with the output.
Right.
Only from the perspective that the user is not going to be able to adequately vet it.
Yeah.
Right?
That's a wonderful perspective. Absolutely. And that's where I see the evolution coming so fast, and we're learning along the
Hmm.
way. Nobody really knows. For example, ChatGPT's database right now ends in September of 2021. That's when they stopped inputs and then focused on modeling. But Google has up to the second information because it scrapes the web faster than any known robot known to man. So there's the information gap, and then there's the continuity of that information. But at the same time, we don't know what goes into the answer unless we ask it. And even when we ask it, it still needs to be fact checked. It still needs to be,
Well, and
you
this,
still need to put your own flair onto it, if you will. And
yeah,
that's a missing component that I try to teach is don't just expect the answer because you don't know where it's coming from. That's like me crowdsourcing information to base off of like my financial decisions. At the end of the day, I still need to make a qualified decision based off of knowing where I get my information. So you can have a generative AI system tell you where it got its information. And it's as simple as saying, cite your sources. If you just
mhm,
type that into the prompt, it will come back and it'll tell you, and then you can make the decision based off of where it gave you. If nothing more, that's still a step in the right direction. And it'll just get better. And
yeah,
then you could take the output and say, okay, well, actually, let's just say Heather Campbell has a ton of information out and knows her spoken word because of her podcast and everything else. Give me a response in the way that Heather Campbell would recommend this. And if it knows you and your work, which is why I'm such an advocate for getting your work out there, blogging, articles, getting published, it'll actually style flex and it'll give you that modified answer. It's just a different way of processing information, and I love it. Like I'm here for it because it's something that we didn't know we had, weeks ago. And now we're
yeah,
living in a new world where we can understand things in a different way. It comes back to that accessibility while mitigating that risk.
yeah. Well, and I think if people are clear on, because there's a couple things that come to mind, and it's really interesting because I haven't tried the whole like cite your sources thing inside of Chat GPT. Um, and I'm wondering like, would it accurately be able to, right? This is what's interesting is does it track its learning sources? I'm not sure. I don't know the answer to that based on how the model is built. But you will absolutely see in the terms of any of these sites that they are not responsible for the output. And also that you do not have legal rights. So, like, for example, copyright registration capabilities based on those outputs, right? And that's in part because you have to use separate tools, separate search functions, separate databases to be able to go search that stuff, right? And so the risk really is that most people don't have the capability of running those searches and doing the true vetting. So what's going to happen is people just skip it. They
Mhm.
just are going to look at the output and decide, this seems pretty good. Either I'm going to use it or not use it. And I feel like this is where, listening to mentors and advisors ahead of time about like, here should be your rules about how you can adopt this while still you know, obtaining your goals and doing it in a way that does not, because what ultimately happens is people are going to choose fast and efficient over quality and over an actual risk assessment. So they're
I
going to
agree.
take on more risk, right? And that is a choice that people have. But I would invite people, and I be curious because I know you work with a lot of thought leaders on how to use AI in a way that preserves your thought leadership, right? Without capitalizing on the thought leadership of others. Because I think it's a very different, if you were to sit down with somebody and say, hey, would you be comfortable taking all of this data off of somebody else's website and just kind of like repositioning it a little bit and using it as your own? I think there are a lot of people that'd be like, no. Some people do that. Let's be clear, even without Chat GPT or AI tools, people do this all day long, which is how some clients end up becoming my clients, as somebody took all their stuff and did that,
Right.
right? So there's lots of this that already happens, but in the context of AI, it's a little bit like it's masked. They could sit down and really have the same outcome because they don't know the source of the information, not really clear on whether AI can track that. And if it's not their own thought leadership, they could end up with actually a really poor quality output, right? So how is there a method, or do you talk to people about how to gauge that quality of output and like how to preserve thought leadership while accessing and utilizing these tools? I know in one
Yeah.
conversation you and I had, there's one idea that I think will be coming next in the AI world, but I would love for you to answer that question first.
It's a great question. And like I led with the beginning of this, it's all evolving so fast that a
Mm,
lot of the current factual information is opinions and theories just being put into practice until we're proven wrong. So I welcome somebody to prove my theory and my answer to that wrong, because that's what makes us better. But in my true opinion of answering that, I believe it falls within two big categories
mm,
based off of two buckets. And I'll explain what I mean by that. Category one is bona fide original content, true thought leadership. I have, you, anyone has dedicated, they put the 10,000 hours in, they've put the work in, they've done the work, they understand it, and now you sit down and you really just think about how you can better the world. And let's be honest, original content is always inspired by past content, but the way that you contextualize it and put it together is your own unique creative edge. I think that that's fair to say. Then the other side of it is you've got repurposed content. So the information that we say in this video, one of us will likely take some of these clips and chop it up and put it on social media so we can redistribute, and that's healthy. And we're not taking credit for each other. We're helping to pursue the better good of information. So I feel like first we have to look at both of those buckets
mm.
as fundamentally different. AI is amazing, amazing at repurposing content right now. Like,
And when you say, just so I'm clear and the listeners are clear, when you say repurposing content, are you talking about somebody that, for example, has, articles, checklists, blogs, like whatever they've put together as the original content, feeding that into Chat GPT and saying, hey, turn this into 5 social media posts, or turn this into, a blip for a newsletter or whatever. Is that what you're talking about?
that's what I'm talking about in the sense of then why I believe it falls within two buckets.
Mm,
And that's the second part of that.
yep.
Those two buckets are, it's everybody else's data and it's only your data.
Mm.
So if we think about it as a simple quadrant, and I don't know if quadrant's the right example here because I just made this up, and this is a great question, is at what point do we bridge the gap of unknown, which is, can AI reproduce your content fast and effectively? Yes. But
Mm,
can AI truly be a thought leadership and have a level of awareness with enough knowledge to simply create concepts? Well, maybe. And the reason I say that is because it's getting close. There's a service that just came out recently called Agent GPT, or it's also called Auto GPT, and it's basically where you fire up autonomous AIs that work on each other and to accomplish a goal, and they will actually create more autonomous AIs in order to critique and pursue the goal. So you can create an AI system that fires off new agents that will work together in order to accomplish the output. Think of it as, I want to write a blog post. What do you need to do that? Well, you need to research a topic, you need to write it, you need to copy edit it, and then you need to truly publish it. Well, agents can critique each other. One can be an editor, one can be a copywriter. They both have different goals. That's a big thought, and I think it's getting there. But at what point is that like level of humanity and awareness available to it? The reason I bring it up that way is it's risky when it's doing that on other people's data. It does have a bigger sample set and a bigger pool to make sense of, but right now the output of AI is based off its inputs. So if we zoom out and think about it, why wouldn't we want to have a data pool just for Heather's body of work and the information that she puts out there? Because now you can actually have it get creative based off of your information. And now you're in a safety net. You know that if you've spoken this word and you've put it out there, that it's got your stamp of approval, you have just reduced your risk down to the floor by design. And
Mhm.
that's in essence the beauty of a large language model. OpenAI just happened to do it with as much of the known addressable internet as possible. Google obviously has their database, but it's other people's information. The fascinating way to think about this is, I think if we focus on training AI with our information, we stand the chance to actually be superhuman and truly create a level that we've never been able to create before. How cool would it be to have your own chatbot for
Right.
your information and say, come up with 3 blog post ideas? And guess what? They're going to be exactly the stuff that you love because they're the topics that you've been talking about. That's where this creativity just catapult takes off. And I
Mm.
believe that's where if we build it right, there's good regulation in place. We it doesn't get worse too much before it gets better. We're going to see this level of output that is just like unknown like anything else that we've ever seen. And it's a hard conversation because there's so many dynamics, but it's a necessary one because
Mm.
that's the way it's going. So there's going to be a time and a place for using generative AI across the web, but I truly believe the future is owning your own information in kind of the same way that blockchain got us rethinking about how to not just have centralized information, but decentralized information. The future of AI, in my opinion, is truly having ownership over your data and having the flexibility to be do things with it that you never thought were possible.
Right. Yeah. And I'm glad you got there because I remember when we spoke at the mastermind, right? I was saying there's a massive opportunity for experts who are sitting on basically a gold mine of their own data, right? So
Right.
whether it's video tutorials, articles, books, all the ways that my clients and probably your clients publish and disseminate data, right? And educate people, educate the marketplace, right? Do all of their various services, et cetera. And some folks have so much data. I think of my clients as mini publishers, right? Like they're
Absolutely.
publishing a ton of content and to have I think we were joking because Rory Vaden was at the event, like a Rory bot or a,
Totally. Yep.
like, and I do think that will be one of the next iterations. I think there's going to be many iterations and like pathways within AI that branch out as people start to develop these concepts of how we can utilize AI to do like some very specific things, right? My fear, and I'm curious what you think about this, is whether that's only going to like where all of what we're talking about will be accessible behind a paywall, which then takes it out of, for some, depending on who we're talking about, out of access. Like, is it going to be a big corporate thing because they're only going to build a tool like that where big corporations are able to pay, right? And that's where I think we have the opportunity to really consider how we utilize AI right now, especially what you're saying, while it's accessible to achieve certain goals, because I don't know the answer of how this will go in the future, right? How much of this is going to be locked up and owned by larger corporations just selling to other big fish in the pond. My interest is around the little guys. I serve small businesses,
Yeah.
right? Small businesses in my mind are the ones that change the world. They are the ones that are scrappy, that are boots on the ground, that are very very versatile, very quick to maneuver, right? Change direction, and who generally are working from a mission oriented standpoint, right? So my interest is in those folks having the right access and the right tools to be nimble and to compete and to expand and have the impact that they want. Curious your thoughts on what you're seeing, if
Yeah.
you're seeing any trends like that.
I truly am I'm starting to see it, but it's such a it's such a full circle that has yet to be closed type of a mindset because again we go back to the how does AI already know about this information? Well, it's because that person was willing to publish it at some point, and it is open information, right? So if you think about just have a visual in your mind of what content is out there and it's free, and what content is out there and it's behind a paywall. Well, there's access restrictions by design.
Right. And let's be clear, free to access and free to read is different than free to use, right?
or
I
or
just
f- or free to even want to pay for it. Like it is not available, right? So
yeah,
proprietary information, things like that. I completely
yes.
agree with you. So, we're trained by some of the best thought leaders in the world that you give away your best for free,
Mm.
always, right? Which is why curtains lifted, everything I got, it's yours on this call, right? Like if it makes sense, we're shipping it, right? And the idea, the way that I kind of put that together,
Mm.
that's a play that I'm thinking about building. Like I've already been talking with my dev team. Maybe we can work on
Mm.
something like that. I'm willing to put my name behind something like that because I believe in it. So the fact is, if I don't do it, it's going to happen in a month regardless. And that's the rate that this is all evolving. But it
Yes.
all comes back to that, what information goes into it. Now, one could say the same about Google. One could say the same about Microsoft and what they have in Bing's database. One could say the same about Netflix. They offer different recommendations, different algorithms, and different AI to give you, at the end of the day, it's the same movie. You could find the same movie on every single service, but they all are going to promote it a little bit differently. One fascinating thing we didn't talk about, which is probably another second half of the podcast, is ads. There's no ads in
Ads.
any of this yet.
Ah.
There's no swaying somebody of a decision. It's just giving the information. So we get to think about all of these dynamics that go into it and make sense of it for us. Where do we want to get into that game? I do believe that the trend is going to continue, which is people are going to put more information into AI to make sense of it. But it all comes back down to now the accessibility.
Mm.
What's great is it used to take a massive development budget and expertise to be able to build an LLM, a large language model, train it, work with it, get an output. Now, for what it's worth, you can sign up for a free OpenAI account, create a new chat session, and teach it some stuff and get your output. And it's questionably one of the best outputs with natural language processing known to man. So the difference is staggering. The question is just,
Mm.
what are we going to do with it? And that's one way of many ways to just continue to be using AI to better
Mhm.
what we're doing, our future, our efforts. I see a big opportunity working in the nonprofit space as well. I just had a friend reach out to me. I used to teach for N10, the nonprofit technology organization, and kind of teach tech for them as well. And just watching eyes open up about possibilities was wild. And he just reached out. He's like, "Hey, are you doing paid speaking gigs? Because I got a nonprofit who's like really interested." And I was like, "Dude, send them my way. I would love to talk with them about it." And this, because I know that right now I see investments in the space being
Mm.
paid back tenfold, right? It's not even about using this to make more money. It's using it to save the money you already have. Are you kidding me? If you can cut down on all this overhead and these costs and having to find these people, and I'm not saying this is going to replace you, but I heard a great quote that I need to find the source for, but it's AI will not replace your job. It's the person using AI that will. And it's a powerful one because it paints a picture that yes, AI will probably take our jobs, especially white collar, highly educated, right? Because that kind of stuff is, dare I say, replaceable, especially back office, things that, are more process driven. But it still is going to require a human to do something with it and make sense of it. Otherwise, our future is just bleak and it's run by a bunch of robots. And then at that point,
Right.
maybe we all just go live on a
We
beach.
all die. Yeah, we
Right.
all die.
But
That's what I
I mean, efficiency will finally be there. Maybe our government finally won't be upside down on its finances, but that's a different conversation for a whole
Right,
different show.
right.
I just see the opportunity there where we truly pay attention to it.
Well, and there is massive opportunity, and I think there is particular opportunity right now for the experts. And I think probably it's a lot of experts that are listening to this show, listening to this conversation, and the advantage that they have over folks that I will just say are earlier in their careers, have not fully developed their expertise, right? Is that they have a superior skill set in vetting outputs, in vetting what comes out, what gets generated by AI to determine like, oh, is this really a match for my messaging? Is this really a match? Is this really the list? Whatever it is that you're creating, right? Because AI, while it is fascinating, and even the generative AI versus general AI, right? The fact that Chat GPT really changed the landscape on being able to generate like quote unquote new content, right? Certainly trained on stuff that is not new, but the difficulty still is in the beginners using it in ways to generate stuff that they cannot vet, right? And I think that puts their business at a significant disadvantage, right? It puts their thought leadership just lower on the scale of lower on the rungs of like where thought leadership should actually be. And those with true thought leadership and true expertise are the ones right now that are positioned to really maximize on the use of AI.
I agree. And my challenge to flip the perspective
Hmm.
on where that's starting to sound like a downer conversation is that the opportunity upside is so profound that if somebody's listening to what you just said and is like, why try? No, that is the exact opposite. The fact is, you now have a hammer to build a house when before you had a rock. You now have a calculator to figure out that math question versus a damn abacus. Can I curse on here? I'm sorry, I didn't
You
ask you before we came
you
on to
can
it.
curse.
Hell yeah. So I see so much invention, so much creativity. You guys, the if first of all, I don't know what everybody's social media feeds look like, but right now mine is like dogs and like tech stuff and golf and AI, right? So I'm just gonna paint that picture. But I'm flooded by AI stuff and seeing some of the creativity that's coming out of young entrepreneurs. I'm talking
Mm.
early 20s who are just they got all the time in the world and they're just trying stuff. Asking ChatGPT to be the CEO of a new business that they just created with the one goal of taking $1,000 investment and making it into 100,000 and doing what it says and trying it and then sharing it or coming up with an idea and going along for the ride and starting an arbitrage company and rather than not knowing what to do asking it how do I do it and then help me come up with the logo, help me come up with product placement, help me write these descriptions. Is all of that fake and falsified information? No, it really is no different than if you hired a business coach to just go do it. You still have to trust the expertise. You
Yeah.
still have to fact check. But if it gets you out of your way, why not? And I see this as this opportunity. I've already started teaching my kids how to work with Chat GPT, generative stuff, working with Midjourney and some of the stuff to bring their
Mm.
creativity to life. I've painted a picture for them that they may still use Google for the rest of their life. I don't know, but they are going to use AI for
Oh
the
yeah.
rest of their life. And if you really, for parents in the room, like I'll say it one time for the people in the back, if you're a parent, if you don't even take, if you don't want to take this seriously for yourself, do it for the kids, right? If Wu Tang could be for the children, let AI be for the children. So when you're really thinking about why this is so important, you have to ask yourself, what are you risking if you don't?
Mm.
Whether it's for your business or your personal life, what is it going to be like for our next generation? That's the bigger question. And I think that's where the impact comes in. The choices we make now affect downstream, not just the near term, but really long term. So I see this as this opportunity now when my girls are thinking about a little business idea or a side hustle, I can ask them, well, how can we make sense of it? How can we build a custom plan for you? And it doesn't have to be dad to be the business coach.
Mm.
It can be an amalgamation of good information and I can still help them with it. Like we can still take baby steps in an arms race.
Mm. Well, and I love the personal creative use of it, like the idea around, brainstorming with it, generating idea lists, like I think those are all wonderful uses. It is a totally separate conversation and a separate topic. Like, what does this mean for our educational landscape, period, right? That's a big one. And fascinating to think about how it is going to shape the face of education. Um, and what I would encourage people to do that are using the AI tools for some of the generative stuff, whether it's coaching, AI, I mean, ideas, sorry, not AI, ideas generated by the AI tool, whether it's, getting more fully educated around a topic or just asking a series of questions. I think that's, first of all, a great use and very different than the commercial use of the output, right?
Correct.
So it's also about knowing the ultimate use. And I think there's loads of creative uses within the segment that does not put your business at risk because you're wrongly relying on some output that's going to be used commercially versus any number of other uses, right?
Yeah, there's a big difference between having a tool to help you build the rocket and then taking credit for the fact that the rocket flies. I in no ever, please never take anything from ChatGPT and just publish it on your website and say it's yours.
Yeah.
Don't do it. Just don't do it.
Right. And
It
this is
there
coming from a copywriter, folks.
right and legal. Like you've got both sides of the equation here, like covering you. Don't do it.
But I
But
worry that that's what some people are
well,
doing,
well,
right?
they are, and
Yes.
there's no way to fix that other
Yep.
than for them to be slapped on the hand and to learn, and Google will slap them on the proverbial hand fast.
I'm
But
I'm
the
curious
the
on
the
that
interesting,
point.
yeah,
The
no,
just
this is interesting. I saw this meme come about, and it made perfect sense. Uh, if you search Google and type in quotes, type as a generative AI model, and just put that in quotes and hit search, you're going to start to see all of this information pulled where it's people taking a de facto response that means nothing from ChatGPT and posting it. You'll see it on Amazon reviews, you'll see it on product reviews, you'll see it in Shopify stores, you'll see it in blog posts, you'll see it in books. I saw screenshots of somebody was holding a book that they ordered and they were reading it. It says, as a generative AI model, I don't have this information in a paragraph. It will get worse before it gets better. I do understand that. But that's
yeah.
because right now we're looking for shortcuts with the opportunity. It's just the name of the game, right? Something comes out, we all have to mess with it. We have to try to break it. We learn from our mistakes, and then we have a better product on the end of it. We're in that interesting bell curve of this
Mm,
insane growth curve. But what we do with it matters. And that's why I'm
yeah.
so glad we have this conversation, is really thinking about it at that deep level about, again, what do we do with the
Mhm.
information? Do we sit on it and do we let everybody else outpace us? Or do we actually take ownership for the fact that the world changed? We have to be aware that that change is ready for us.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and even the personal experimentation, like you mentioned, mid-journey, right? I really encourage people to get in and see what is happening inside some of these models, right? To just understand the models and understand the trends. I feel like we all need to be watching these trends and participating in some way so that we are educated enough to continue to participate in the conversation. So I feel like this could go on and on. I mean, we have just touched on a few topics and I know there's so many more. For folks that are sitting here going, I need to connect with Jim. I need to be following him. I need to see if you're listening, go follow Jim because he recommends like specific, you have an ongoing list of like AI tools,
Five a
right?
day, 5 a day.
Right?
I put
It
out
is
a,
like
at least
never
on Instagram,
ending.
yeah, I put out a carousel a day of the top 5 AI-based sites that do something cool just to open people up. And I record videos showing how to use them because I have to learn them too. And I don't want to recommend something that I don't know. So I love showing people thank you. I appreciate you. Yeah.
Yeah,
On
absolutely.
all the socials, I'm at cause hacker. So if you've ever heard that
Mhm.
term growth hacker, a while back, I strayed away from doing it for the money and I wanted to do it for the cause. That goes back to the whole mission. So at cause hacker, you can find me on all the socials. Instagram is probably the preferred channel. Just feel
So
free to DM me, say hi. If you do something cool with AI, tag me. I reshare almost all of them. I love them. And
that's
yeah, if you know that AI is for you, you don't know where to start. One thing I'm doing as a give back to everybody who so graciously invites me on their show is I like just offering a free call to everybody to just talk about what it can be, because this also helps me think bigger and think of ways that it can really apply to small businesses. So if you're interested, you want to book a call with me, jimcarter.me/call. So my name.me/call. And I'd love to see if there's something I can do to help you out, point you in the right direction, and we just kind of take it from there.
Well, it's so generous of you to offer a call. I mean, you've already demonstrated a handful of like very creative uses of AI just here in this call, where I know we talked about a lot of other stuff. But I think there are a lot of people still sitting on the question of like, how do I use this? What do I do? And I love that you are a mix of both like boots on the ground, recommending, or reviewing. I don't know what you call these reviews of the different AI tools, right? But these are the kinds of things where people can start to, I think, see little ways of like, oh, I could try this, I could do this, I could test this out. And I think that is what it's going to take for a lot of us for some time.
So
Um,
I've got one more thing I can give you on that.
yeah.
For everybody listening, if you don't know where to start and you want to follow along, the most popular YouTube video on my channel is actually me teaching how to work with ChatGPT using the prompts, and I even teach a little bit about Midjourney. This was a main stage presentation at my mastermind that I gave earlier in the year, and I'd love to just give that to you guys as well. So if you want to follow along, learn from me, in an hour, I teach you how you can build an entire business with ChatGPT to get you started. Everything from the storytelling to the way that you present the sales to coming up with the business plan. And again, it's a way of thinking. It's a way of processing. And then I also show how to work with Midjourney. Happy to give that to everybody. If you just
Amazing.
go to fastfoundations.com/chat GPT. So exactly how it sounds, fastfoundations.com/chat GPT. And you can watch the video. And if you want to throw your email in there, I'll send you the slide deck that I present with, so you can copy and paste all the prompts and run through it. That's my favorite way, just to open people up to it, so you have a real example of, oh, this is what's possible. And the best way I've seen people use that is they take what I'm teaching and they plug in a little bit about their own business, and it just blows minds, because when I built it, I was like, wow, this is going to be so good. I can't wait to show people.
Perfect. Oh, that's so generous. So if you're listening, I'm going to share the link to your masterclass, as well as the link over to Jim's Instagram and the link to sign up for a call. Highly recommend you take him up on that at the show notes page, which can be found at legalwebsitewarrior.com/podcast. Go find Jim's episode. Jim, such a joy to connect with you again. I have so many additional questions swirling right now. I know there's going to be another conversation around this, but I really look forward to learning more from you, continuing to remain connected, and also sending a few folks your way. Any
Appreciate you.
final thoughts you would like to leave our listeners with today?
We had a great conversation. A lot of this it's still evolving. My
Mm,
my challenge to everybody is just give it a shot, lean in, try something, be willing to go back to being a novice at something, because that's what I did when I fully embraced on this. I had to think differently, and it's brought a lot of really wonderful things into my life. Great conversations, great new
mm,
clients, great opportunities, and I want that for small business owners and employees. Just like my wife, who she's happily employed. She's not an entrepreneur, but she found a way to work with it that made sense.
mm.
So just be willing to lean in and give it a shot. And I guarantee you're going to think about showing up a little bit differently.
Awesome. And I'll ping again. People go walk through Jim's masterclass. I want to go do that myself. Jim, appreciate you. We will be in touch. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you too.